Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on this video, and if you're interested, I also have reviews of all the other Andor episodes, as well as Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, as well as my sequel fan remake. Feel free to check those out, and let's get into this. So, Andor episode 6. After a couple of pointless scenes, we were told that one of the guys with the group Andor is in was a former stormtrooper. Another super new idea. They didn't do anything with the last stormtrooper. I don't expect them to do anything with this one. And anyway, they are disguised to fit in with some tribe that the Empire allows to have some celebration at their headquarters to keep them happy on this planet they're on, and they think they're stupid. The Empire thinks the tribe is stupid, and this will be the last one before they basically enslave them to build their new project in the tribe's Sacred Valley. And then right away, Andor's group has changed out of nowhere from dressing like them to ragtag-looking Imperials, which sort of goes unnoticed, except one of the Imperial guys is on their side, you find out in the end, and so he kind of makes it seem normal. And the real Imperials that they were, I guess not replacing, but sort of walked away from the base that they were guarding, literally to take a piss. Which they happened to take right by some of Andor's group, where they were hiding, the two women that were hiding, and they were going to swim underneath in the water to the base, and these guys happened to walk like a mile outside the base to take a whiz just so we could get this shot of them maybe catching them. It was so dumb. It just made no sense. And, go pee inside, or I'm sure you could find a spot. I mean, this is just, it's silly to walk that far away. And then a scene with an Imperial top guy with his family and their problems, and it's like, I don't care. Nor do I want to feel sympathetic towards the villains. Like, why do I need to see one of the admirals in the Empire and his family issues? It's just so dumb, and you don't even know who he is. There's no build up. It's just some guy, and it's like, oh yay, I care. It's like, no, I don't. They do this in modern media all the time, where they're trying to like rationalize or somehow make us feel sympathetic towards the bad guys, and it's like, no, I don't need to see this. I don't need to see his kid. I don't need to see that he's an overbearing father and all these other things. It's just so lame. I don't understand. I don't know if the writer, that's his life, so he's like, I'm going to apply what happened to me anyway. And then the Imperials exchange furs with the villagers. Yep, you heard that correctly. They exchanged furs with the villagers for some reason, and no one knows why. And then now we're into the heist, and that was the whole premise of the episode. They were going to steal an Imperial shuttle or craft that had a bunch of this, what appeared to be gold things or whatever. They're worth money. It doesn't really matter. I actually didn't mind it. I thought it was an alright heist overall. I like the communication blocker the ladies put on a timer up on the base, on the bridge and stuff. That was kind of cool. And it was a cool plan that they had, and it worked despite how stupid it was described in the previous episodes. And that's kind of funny. It's like the plan actually went into effect and worked, but in every previous episode, it sounded stupid and didn't make any sense, and they didn't know what they were doing. And they never actually showed you how their plan changed and why it ended up working, which I'm guessing was just Andor must have helped them off camera, I guess. I don't really know how that came to be, but I guess it just did. But overall, I didn't mind it. I mean, it was okay. And the one Imperial guy was like the guy that was like, super jerky to the other soldiers and stuff, turned out to be on their side and stuff, and that's fine. And he did it because he didn't like the head boss, who we saw his family and dysfunction and blah blah blah. But again, you just didn't really get why you went from this plan isn't even going to work at all to it worked out perfectly, and there was absolutely no issues, and nothing happened to them, and there was no fighting, no dog fighting, nothing. And I was under the assumption on the previous episodes, when you saw that their plan was kind of ragtag and had holes in it, and Andor called those out, and they didn't like him for it, that there would be like a lot of challenges along the way with their plan and things that they would run into. But really, the only thing they ran into is one Imperial officer happened to walk in on them with a couple of guys, and they were taken care of easily. Nobody died, nothing happened as far as their side goes. So it's just kind of like they set up this tension-filled possibility, but then nothing really stopped them, and there was no issue. So it's kind of like, it's kind of anticlimactic in that sense. So it's just not very well written overall, but I didn't mind it in the sense that it was still kind of a cool cool set of scenes, but yeah, it lacked. They could have done so much more with it. And then we get the first of several totally pointless shots of this tribe singing, like they went toward, they're outside the base doing their singing, and they showed this multiple times, and you're just kind of like, I don't know. I guess they were attempting to imply the hippie tribe versus the system, the empire, and you're just kind of like, why am I listening to these people singing? But anyways, whatever. I also noticed that all the Imperials, save a handful, were wearing officer attire. There's like a handful of actual soldiers and no stormtroopers at all. It's just a whole pile of officers at this base. Overabundance of officers. And that was a little strange. You kind of get, I always got the impression from sort of military that there'd be an overwhelming amount of soldiers and a small amount of officers, but this is sort of the opposite of this case, which is really weird. And then the other thing I noticed is that the rebellion isn't in the business of liberating anyone, but are basically just thieves at this point, as the theft of the vault begins. So at the beginning of the scene where they're doing the heist, they're basically they're just stealing everything. They're not helping anybody. They're not helping this tribe. There's no greater good except for just stealing a bunch of stuff. And for me, that's kind of a bad way to start off what you're presenting the rebellion as. Like, the rebellion was all about helping liberate planets and species and people and slaves and blah, 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 blah. At least that was my impression. It was all about going against the Empire, but now it's just like, no, whatever, who cares about that tribal group? Whatever happens to them, happens to them, and, we just got to steal the stuff. And I mean, I get it, you need money to fund a rebellion, but it's like, where's that high level goodness? You know what I mean? Like that really good cause that's above all that stuff that's overarching. That stuff does happen, but you know what I mean? It just sort of, that was kind of weird. I thought maybe that would be the focal point of the early rebellion, but instead it's just stealing a bunch of stuff. Then we get another pointless shot of the tribespeople, which we didn't need, which just kind of made this episode 10 minutes longer than it needed to be, or whatever, 5 minutes longer. And then we get this big celestial event, and that's what the tribes people were worshiping or whatever. Beautiful visual and all that stuff, but plot-wise, it's just, you didn't need any of that. You didn't need the tribe at all. I don't know. At the beginning, when Andor's group of guys was dressed as the tribe, I thought that was part of how they were going to sneak in there, and then it turned out not to be. So you're like, why was this tribe even part of this episode at all? Totally needless, other than this visual to like get us all excited for this visual of their worshiping the celestial event. It's just kind of, again, it's so shallow. It's just, there's nothing there. The heist overall happens with very little action whatsoever. So there's a little bit of action, like I said, with the one officer and a couple of his dudes catch them, and there's a bit of a shoot 'em up scene, but it's very brief. And then you get this cool visual of the TIE fighters coming out to go after them, but they never actually reach them. Like, there's never an actual conflict in the sky or in space with them. They just kind of get away, and you're like, what was the point of that? And they really emphasize the TIE fighters being like a big deal in this series so far, and which is fine, and they would have been intimidating to the average person or whatever, people in the rebellion, but it's like, so where was the big dogfight or the big problem, or like maybe they shoot at them and maybe they almost crash? No, it's just kind of, they just get out, and that was really weak, I thought. You can have all the great visuals that you want of the celestial event and the TIE fighters flying through it and all that stuff. That's super cool, but nothing actually happens involving them. So you're kind of like, what was the point of this? For me, that makes it worse than a generic end to an episode or a show. It's like there was nothing. They just they did the heist, got out, very little issue, very little conflict, not a lot going on. Pretty easy. They didn't really have to do anything, and it's kind of like there could have so easily could have been written in where it's like somebody catches them at the wrong time, or something happens where their ship gets shot and they have to make all these adjustments and do all this stuff, or maybe there's not enough fuel in it, right? They didn't realize, oh no, we stole this ship and they didn't even gas it up, and now we got to figure out a way and we're going to crash, or something to make it exciting, and they just kind of didn't do any of those things, and those are all very basic things. They didn't do any of them, so it's just they win, they stole the gold thingies. That it would have been so easy to make this more interesting, and they just didn't bother. Then there was this guy, which was kind of cool. He's got the multiple arms and stuff like that. I'm always looking for something interesting with the aliens in Disney Star Wars, because it's all humans all the time. So this was kind of cool. He's still a humanoid, but I like that. And then after all that happens, you're right back to just boring, pointless dialogue for another few scenes, just to drag this out longer than it needed to be. And ultimately, despite the fact that I didn't mind the heist, even though it has a lot of problems as I've described, the show following this episode, which is supposed to be this sort of climactic thing, is really, it's quite terrible, actually. Like I said, there's so many things they could have added on to make it more interesting. They just didn't bother. I don't know if it was a budget thing, or they just didn't care, or they just think the fans are going to watch it anyway because there's a Star Wars label on it. But they could have literally thrown out, after watching this episode, like I said before, they could have thrown out 2 and 3 probably completely, at least 2 for sure. Cut everything back. You probably could have told the story of the first 5 episodes in like an hour and a half, so like 2 episodes. But after watching this episode, I'm sitting there going like, why didn't they just start it here? Why did they even bother with the previous? There was no point in the previous 5 episodes. If they had started here, that would have actually maybe been interesting. And you'd still have an 8 or whatever episode season. But the first 5 episodes, you might as well just throw them away. It's all just a bunch of barely expository dialogue. Most of it's useless. You don't even need it, actually, after watching this episode. You could have just started here, and that would have been perfectly fine. You could have deleted half the crap in this one, too. All the tribe scenes and needless dialogue, and the whole beginning scenes, the 3 or 4 of them, were completely pointless. They did nothing to add to the story. If you'd done all that, this would have been actually a pretty cool intro to the series. 30-minute episode of this heist would have been kind of cool to start off with. But, everything else in the series is just complete waste of time. I don't know what the point of any of it was. And then Andor kills the one guy for literally no reason, other than some bullcrap words from that other guy with no substance. Like, he just kills a guy. Like, there was no reason to kill him at all. I don't want to be in a situation where it's like, oh, I'm really excited that the rebellion is just crappy people. But it's like, they are. They're crappy people. They're crappy people. They were crappy people after the last episode. Everyone's negative. Everyone sucks. They're trying to normalize this idea of like the totally flawed jerk somehow does the odd good thing, and I'm supposed to be excited about that. It's like, no, I want a rebellion where their entire philosophy is built around helping liberate people, helping to make the galaxy a better place, and that modus operandi supersedes their crappy personalities. I don't want a bunch of jerks and losers and people that do stupid things like killing guys for no reason, but that's what we've got here with Andor. This is the beginning of the rebellion. It's just terrible. Basically, the rebellion is just a bunch of terrible assholes at the beginning. They're all selfish, and it sucks. It's such a stupid way to do it, and you start to say to yourself, well, at what point does that switch? At that point, I'm checked out of the episode. There's a bunch of blah, blah, blah dialogue scenes that I just kind of sped through, fast-forwarded, because I was like, I don't even care. So if I screwed up something because I missed the last 3 scenes of needless, pointless dialogue, I'm sorry, but I just don't care at that point. This show is bad. I thought it was bad. It's just getting worse and worse and worse with every episode, and pointless, and sorry to say, but it sucks. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.